It's 70 pounds of copper. If I drop it, I break my foot. I'm setting it down slowly.
Don't tell me what to do! Step back! Hands up!
My hands are visible. I am not resisting.
You're escalating nothing. You're trespassing. Turn around now!
The command tore through the humid morning air, shattering the industrial hum of the municipal recycling center. Elias Thorne didn't flinch. He didn't drop the bag of copper piping he was holding either. He simply tightened his grip, turned slowly with the calculated precision of a man who had survived 3 decades of military service, and looked down the barrel of the situation. He was just recycling scrap metal from a rental property he owned. But to the young officer screaming at him, he was a threat that needed to be neutralized. "I said drop it!" Officer Kyle Vance shouted again, his hand hovering aggressively over his holstered sidearm, his other hand pointing a taser directly at Elias's chest. "I hear you, officer," Elias said, his voice a deep, gravelly rumble that carried the weight of command. "But if I drop this bag, 70 pounds of copper pipe is going to smash my toes. I'm going to set it down, slowly. Don't you tell me what you're going to do." Vance stepped closer, invading the personal space that Elias had spent a lifetime defending. Officer Kyle Vance was 29 years old with 4 years on the force and a reputation that preceded him, though not the kind of reputation a good cop wants. He was known in the precinct locker room as a hothead, the kind of guy who viewed every interaction with the public as a combat scenario where he had to be the victor. He had accumulated 9 complaints in 48 months, 5 for verbal abuse, 3 for excessive force, and 1 for profiling. Every single one had been dismissed or buried by a union rep who knew how to work the system. Vance believed he was the thin blue line. In reality, he was a liability waiting to explode. Standing opposite him was Elias Thorne. At 58 years old, Elias was built like a brick retaining wall. He stood 6'2" with broad shoulders that hadn't slumped an inch since his retirement. He was a retired Army Master Sergeant, a rank earned through blood sweat and the distinct ability to lead men into hell and bring them back. He had a Silver Star from an operation in Panama back in '89, a Purple Heart from the Gulf and knees that had been reconstructed more times than he cared to count. He was a man of absolute discipline. He paid his taxes early, he flew the flag on holidays, and he respected the law. But he also knew the difference between lawful authority and a bully with a badge. "I am setting this down," Elias repeated, his eyes locking onto Vance's with an intensity that would have made a private wet himself. He bent his knees, slightly ignoring the sharp sting of old shrapnel wounds, and lowered the canvas bag to the concrete. "There, it's down. Now what seems to be the problem, son?" "Don't call me son." Vance snapped his face, flushing a dangerous shade of red. "Step away from the bag. Keep your hands where I can see them." Elias straightened up, dusting his hands on his work pants. He was wearing a faded gray t-shirt, paint-splattered cargo pants, and heavy work boots. He looked like a laborer. He looked like a scrapper. To Officer Vance, he looked like a criminal. "I'm stepping back," Elias said, taking one measured step. "I have my ID in my back pocket. I have the permit for this drop-off in the truck. I'm renovating my duplex on Elm Street. Everything here is above board." "I decide what's above board," Vance spat back. "We got a call about a suspicious individual stealing city property. You fit the description." "Stealing?" Elias let out a short, dry chuckle. "I'm bringing metal in, officer, not taking it out. That's how recycling works." "You got a smart mouth," Vance said, unholstering his taser completely, now the red laser dot dancing on Elias's chest. "I don't like smart mouths." Elias's demeanor shifted. The casual contractor vanished, replaced instantly by the master sergeant. His posture stiffened, his chin lifted. "And I don't like having a weapon pointed at me when I haven't committed a crime. You need to lower that weapon and check my credentials." "You don't give orders here," Vance screamed, his voice cracking. He was losing control, and in his mind there was only one way to get it back: dominance. The municipal recycling center on the east side of town was a sprawling lot of concrete and sorted piles of refuse. It was a place of rules and order, which was exactly why Elias Thorne liked it. You had the glass bin, the cardboard compactor, and the high-value metal cages. Elias had been coming here for 20 years. He knew the flow. He knew the schedule. But he didn't know Brad Miller. Brad Miller was 34 years old and had been the site manager for exactly 6 months. He was a man of small power and large insecurities. He spent most of his days in the air-conditioned portable office, watching the security feeds and looking for reasons to assert his authority. Brad was the type of man who measured his self-worth by how many people he could tell no in a single day. That Tuesday morning, the sun was bright, casting long, sharp shadows across the yard. Elias had arrived at 10:15 a.m., backing his Ford F-150 into the designated unloading zone. He had spent the last week tearing out the old plumbing from his rental property, a duplex he had bought as an investment for his retirement. He had stripped the copper, cleaned it, and bagged it. He had his resident access card. He had his contractor's license. He had done everything right. From his office window, Brad Miller watched the black Ford truck back in. He saw a large black man get out. He saw the work clothes. He saw the heavy bags. In Brad's mind, the equation was simple. Black man plus old truck plus copper wire equals crackhead scrapper. He didn't bother to check the computer to see if Elias had scanned his resident card at the gate. He didn't bother to walk out and ask the man if he needed assistance. Brad had been reading online forums about scrappers hitting municipal yards, stealing metal out of the bins to resell at private yards for cash. He convinced himself in the span of 30 seconds that Elias wasn't unloading. He was scouting. Or maybe he was unloading garbage into the metal bin to hide theft. It didn't matter what the logic was. Brad just wanted him gone. He watched Elias heft a heavy bag of copper. "Look at that," Brad muttered to himself. "Probably stripped that out of a foreclosed house. Not on my watch." Brad picked up the phone. He didn't dial the non-emergency line, which was the protocol for a suspicion check. He dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency? "Yeah, this is Brad Miller, manager at the Municipal Recycling Center on Industrial Way. I've got a guy here trespassing. He's looting the metal bins." "Is he armed, sir?" the dispatcher asked. Brad hesitated. He looked at Elias, who was currently wiping sweat from his forehead with a rag. Elias had a utility knife clipped to his belt, a standard tool for any contractor. "Yeah," Brad lied, his voice dropping to a whisper to sound more afraid. "He's got a knife on his belt. And he's acting aggressive. He's big. He's making my staff uncomfortable. I need an officer here now. We have a unit in the area. Officers are en route. Stay inside and do not approach the suspect." Brad hung up the phone with a smug smile. He liked the excitement. He liked being the one who called in the cavalry. He adjusted his polo shirt, grabbed his clipboard, his shield of authority, and walked out onto the loading dock to watch the show. He stood about 50 feet away, leaning against a railing waiting for the police to arrive and do his dirty work. He watched Elias sorting the pipes, separating the brass fittings from the copper, meticulous and slow. Brad didn't see a disciplined worker. He saw a man who didn't belong in his clean, organized yard. "Enjoy it while you can, buddy," Brad whispered. When Officer Vance's cruiser screeched into the lot 5 minutes later, skipping the check-in gate entirely, Brad felt a surge of validation. He pointed silently toward Elias like a Roman emperor condemning a gladiator. He didn't need to speak. The finger point said it all. "That's the bad guy. Get him." Officer Kyle Vance slammed his cruiser door shut, the sound echoing like a gunshot across the concrete yard. He didn't look at the manager, Brad Miller. He didn't stop to ask for details. He didn't assess the scene for actual danger. His adrenaline was already redlining because the dispatch had said armed subject and looting. Vance saw the target. Elias was the only black man in the yard. In Vance's tunnel vision, that was all the confirmation he needed. He bypassed 2 white men who were unloading a trailer of landscaping debris and marched straight toward the figure by the black truck. Elias had just lifted the last bag when he heard the shout. He saw the officer approaching, not walking, but storming. Elias knew body language. He had trained thousands of soldiers to read it. He saw the clenched fists, the forward-leaning gait, the eyes wide with a mixture of fear and aggression. This boy wasn't here to talk. He was here to fight. "You step away from the vehicle," Vance had hollered initially. Elias had turned calm. "Morning, officer. Something I can help you with." That was when Vance had drawn the taser. Now, standing 5 feet apart, the standoff was deteriorating rapidly. "I asked you for ID," Vance barked, though he hadn't actually asked. He had demanded compliance without context. "And I want to know why you're stealing city property." "I'm not stealing," Elias said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming slower, more enunciated. He spoke to Vance the way one speaks to a spooked horse. "I am a resident of this county. I own property at 405 Elm. I am depositing copper piping from a renovation. I have the receipt for the dump fee in my dashboard." "I don't care about your dashboard." Vance stepped sideways, trying to flank Elias, acting out a tactical maneuver he'd probably seen in a movie. "The manager says you're looting. You have a weapon. I see the knife." Elias glanced down at the yellow DeWalt box cutter clipped to his pocket. "It's a box cutter. I'm a contractor." "It's a weapon, hands on your head now." "Officer," Elias said, "I am a retired Master Sergeant of the United States Army. I am not a threat to you. If I reach for my head, I have to drop my arms first. If I reach for my wallet, I have to move my hands. You need to tell me exactly how you want me to move so you don't do something stupid." Vance bristled at the correction. He hated being told what to do, especially by a suspect. "You think you're tough. You think being a vet makes you special. I think it makes me disciplined," Elias countered. "Something you seem to be lacking." That was the breaking point. Vance's ego couldn't take the hit. He holstered the taser and reached for his handcuffs. "That's it. You're under arrest for disorderly conduct and trespassing." "Trespassing?" Elias shook his head in disbelief. "I paid to be here." "Not anymore. Turn around." "I am showing you my hands," Elias said, holding them out, palms open. "I am not resisting, but you are making a mistake that is going to cost you more than you can afford, son." Vance lunged. He didn't wait for Elias to turn. He grabbed Elias's left wrist and yanked it. Elias didn't pull back. He let the officer take the arm, his muscles loose. He knew that tensing up would be cited as resisting arrest in the report. He had to be perfect. He had to be better than the man assaulting him. "I am complying," Elias said loudly, his voice booming for the witnesses. "I am complying." Vance twisted the arm behind Elias's back, leveraging it upward. "Stop resisting. Stop fighting me," Vance screamed for the benefit of the body camera, creating a false audio narrative that contradicted the video reality. "I am not fighting," Elias said through gritted teeth. "Watch the shoulder. I have a rotator cuff injury from service." Vance didn't care. He pushed the arm higher. The pain in Elias's shoulder was white-hot, a familiar agony that transported him back to a Humvee rollover in Kandahar. But he didn't scream. He breathed, in through the nose, out through the mouth. "Get on the ground!" Vance shouted, trying to trip Elias with a leg sweep. Elias stumbled but stayed upright. "I can't," he grunted. "My knees. I have titanium in both knees. I cannot kneel." "I said get on the ground." Vance kicked at the back of Elias's leg, a sloppy, aggressive strike that bruised the calf but failed to buckle the veteran's stance. "Officer!" Elias barked, the command voice finally breaking free. It was the voice that had directed fire under ambush, the voice that had kept 19-year-old kids from panicking when the mortars fell. "I am physically disabled. I cannot kneel. If you force me down, you will break my legs. Do you understand?" For a split second, Vance hesitated. The authority in that voice was undeniable. It wasn't the pleading of a criminal. It was the order of a superior. But Brad Miller was watching. The other recyclers were watching. Vance couldn't back down now. He felt the eyes of the crowd on him, and his insecurity curdled into rage. "I don't care about your legs," Vance shouted. "You refuse to comply. I will light you up." He reached for the taser again. "Do not tase me," Elias shouted. "I have a pacemaker." This was a lie. His heart was fine, but he knew he had to escalate the perceived risk to stop this kid from electrocuting him. He had to think strategically. Vance holstered the taser and went back to physical force. He jumped on Elias's back, wrapping an arm around his neck in a sloppy headlock, trying to drag the 240-pound man to the pavement. Elias stood like a statue. He could have flipped Vance. He could have broken the boy's wrist in 3 places with a simple Krav Maga maneuver he'd taught for a decade. But he knew that if he touched a hair on this officer's head, he would be shot. He would be just another dead black man, and the headline would read, "Officer kills violent suspect in struggle." So Elias took the abuse. He let Vance hang on him. He let Vance scratch his neck. He let Vance kick his ankles. "I am not resisting," Elias repeated like a mantra. "I am standing still." By now a crowd had gathered. 2 men in neon vests, city workers, had stopped their truck. A woman in a minivan had her phone out filming. "Hey," the woman yelled. "He's not doing anything. Leave him alone. Back up!" Vance screamed at the crowd, breathless and sweating his cap askew. "Interference with an arrest is a felony." Realizing he couldn't drag Elias down, Vance resorted to brute force on the arms. He wrenched Elias's right arm back, forcing the wrists together. The angle was unnatural. Elias felt something pop in his shoulder. He bit his lip so hard he tasted copper fitting, he thought grimly. Vance slapped the handcuffs on. He ratcheted them tight. Click, click, click. Then he squeezed them 1 notch tighter, just for spite. The metal bit into the ulnar nerve. "You got him!" Brad Miller called out from the loading dock, walking closer now that the threat was restrained. "Good job, officer. He was terrifying my staff." Elias turned his head to look at Miller. "You're a liar," Elias said calmly. "And you're a coward." Vance shoved Elias forward, pushing him toward the cruiser. "Shut up. You have the right to remain silent." "I know my rights," Elias said. "Better than you do. I want a supervisor on the scene." "You'll get nothing until we get to the station," Vance sneered. "Walk." The walk to the patrol car was the longest 100 yards of Elias Thorne's life. It wasn't the pain in his shoulder or the throbbing in his knees that bothered him. It was the indignity. He had worn the uniform of his country for 30 years. He had represented the United States in Germany and Korea, in Iraq and Afghanistan. He had been saluted by generals. He had shaken the hand of the president. And now he was being frog-marched through a garbage dump by a boy who hadn't been born when Elias earned his first stripe, all because he was recycling while black. The bystanders were loud now. "Get his badge number," someone shouted. "I got it," the woman with the phone yelled. "Officer Vance, I got it all on video. He didn't do anything." Elias stopped walking. Vance shoved him, but Elias planted his feet. He turned toward the woman filming. "Ma'am," Elias projected his voice. "My name is Master Sergeant Elias Thorne, U.S. Army retired. I am being arrested for recycling my own property. Please make sure that video is saved." "Shut your mouth." Vance grabbed Elias by the back of the neck and forced his head down. "Stop grandstanding stolen valor-looking piece of trash." Stolen valor. The words hit Elias harder than a bullet. To accuse a man who had left pieces of his soul in the desert of faking his service, that was the ultimate insult. "You better pray you're right," Elias whispered. "Because if you're wrong, God help you." Vance opened the back door of the cruiser and shoved Elias inside. It was a tight fit. Elias had to contort his bad knees to get in. Vance didn't help. He slammed the door on Elias's ankle before Elias could pull it in, then reopened it and slammed it again properly. not even apologizing for the crush. Elias sat in the hard plastic seat, the cage separating him from the air conditioning. He looked out the window. He saw his truck, the driver's door, still unlocked, his keys, likely still in the ignition or his pocket. He saw his bags of copper sitting on the ground. "My truck," Elias said as Vance got in the front. "You can't leave my truck unlocked with my tools in it." "Not my problem," Vance said, checking his reflection in the rearview mirror to fix his hair. "Maybe your buddy the manager will watch it for you." Vance started the engine and peeled out of the recycling center, hitting the siren for a split second, just to assert dominance as he exited the gate. Brad Miller stood on the dock, arms crossed, watching them leave. He felt a moment of triumph. The problem was gone. The yard was pure again. He turned to his employee. "Toss those bags in the city bin. If he comes back, he can fish them out." In the back of the cruiser, Elias closed his eyes. He began to compartmentalize. He put the pain in a box. He put the anger in a box. He focused on the mission. The mission now was documentation and survival. He memorized the time, 10:42 a.m. He memorized the route. He memorized the officer's name, K. Vance badge number 492. He wasn't a prisoner. He was an operative behind enemy lines, and he was gathering intelligence. The drive to the 4th precinct took 20 minutes. Vance spent the entire time lecturing Elias. "You guys always have to make it difficult," Vance said, glancing back through the partition. "If you'd just shown me ID when I asked, we wouldn't be here. It's about respect. You gotta learn to respect the badge." Elias said nothing. He stared out the window, watching the city pass by. He had fought for the freedom of people to speak, even idiots. He exercised his right to remain silent. When they pulled into the precinct, Sally Port, Vance yanked Elias out of the car. "Let's go. Booking is this way." They walked into the station, past the front desk, and into the processing area. The air smelled of stale coffee and floor wax. Behind the high desk sat Lieutenant Frank Higgins. Higgins was 55, a thick-necked man with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen everything. He was the watch commander. He looked up from his paperwork as Vance dragged Elias in. Higgins frowned. He didn't look at Vance. He looked at the prisoner. He saw the boots. He saw the cargo pants. But mostly he saw the way the man held his head. He saw the eyes, alert, calm, furious, but controlled. Higgins had served in the First Gulf War. He knew the look. "What do we have here, Vance?" Higgins asked, his voice low. "Disorderly, trespassing, resisting." Vance rattled off, dumping Elias's wallet and keys on the counter. "Guy was looting the recycling center, refused to ID, tried to fight me." "I did not fight," Elias said. His voice was calm, but it filled the room. "And I did not refuse. I attempted to comply, and this officer assaulted me." "Quiet!" Vance slapped the counter. Higgins stood up slowly. "Vance, zip it." Higgins walked around the desk. He looked at Elias's wrists, seeing the dark purple swelling around the handcuffs. He looked at the way Elias was favoring his left knee. Then he looked at the wallet Vance had thrown. It had flipped open. In the clear plastic window, it wasn't a driver's license. It was a CAC card, a common access card, a Department of Defense identification. And next to it, tucked into the leather, was a blue retiree ID card with the rank MSG-E8. Higgins picked up the wallet. He looked at the ID. He looked at Elias. "Master Sergeant?" Higgins asked. "Retired," Elias replied. "3rd Infantry Division. Currently a civilian contractor for DOD Logistics." Higgins felt the blood drain from his face. He looked at Vance, who was smirking, oblivious to the nuclear bomb he had just detonated. "Vance!" Higgins said, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Uncuff this man. What loot? He's a suspect. We have to process." "I said take the damn cuffs off," Higgins roared, the sound echoing off the cinder block walls. "Right now." Vance jumped, startled. He fumbled for his keys. I don't understand. You arrested a master sergeant with a silver star, Higgins said, reading the folded DD-214 card Elias kept behind his license, a habit of old soldiers who wanted to be ready for the VA. You arrested a disabled veteran for... What, recycling? Vance got the cuffs off. Elias rubbed his wrists. The skin was broken. Blood trickled down his thumb. I need a medic, Elias said coldly. And I need my lawyer. And I need this officer's badge number recorded in the log. Higgins looked at Elias. Sergeant, I am. I cannot tell you how sorry I am. This is a mistake. We can fix this right here. I'll drive you back to your truck myself. Elias looked at Higgins. There was no soldierly camaraderie in his eyes anymore, just the cold distance of a man who had been betrayed by the country he loved. No, Lieutenant. We cannot fix this here. You can't unring a bell, and you can't unarrest a man for being black in public. Elias pointed at Vance. That boy didn't see a sergeant. He saw a thug. And until you fix that, you haven't fixed anything. Elias Thorne was released 20 minutes later, but he didn't leave the station quietly. He walked out the front door where his lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Sarah Jenkins, was already waiting. She had been called by Elias's wife, who had tracked his phone to the precinct when he didn't come home for lunch. By 6 p.m., the video was online. The woman at the recycling center hadn't just recorded it. She had uploaded it to TikTok and Twitter with the caption, "Racist cop assaults retired Army vet at recycling center." The video was damning. It showed Elias standing perfectly still with his hands up. It showed Vance screaming like a lunatic. It showed the arm twist. It showed the stolen valor comment. The internet did what the internet does. Within 2 hours, it had 2 million views. By the next morning, it was on CNN. The headline ran across the bottom of the screen, "Hero Sergeant Treated Like Trash." Elias didn't watch the news. He was at the VA hospital getting his shoulder imaged. The rotator cuff was re-torn. He would need surgery. Again. The lawsuit was filed 3 days later. It was a masterclass in legal destruction. Claim 1, unlawful arrest. Claim 2, excessive force. Claim 3, violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act, ignoring the knee injury. Claim 4, violation of civil rights under Section 1983. Claim 5, defamation the stolen valor comment. Brad Miller, the manager at the recycling center, thought he could hide. He couldn't. The waste management company fired him before the sun went down on the second day. His statement to the press, "I was just following protocol," was torn apart when the 911 tape was released. He's looting. He has a knife. The lie was on tape. He was charged with filing a false police report. But the real focus was on the city. The police chief tried to hold a press conference. He talked about context and split-second decisions. Then a reporter asked, "Chief, the man was standing still with his hands up. He is a 58-year-old disabled veteran. What context justifies twisting his arm behind his back?" The chief had no answer. The internal affairs investigation was fast-tracked. They pulled Vance's file. They found the 9 previous complaints. They found the pattern. They found that Lieutenant Higgins had actually recommended Vance for remedial training 6 months ago, but it had been blocked by the union. The system was on trial, and Elias Thorne was the witness for the prosecution. The city knew they couldn't win. If they put Elias Thorne's Silver Star recipient grandfather church deacon in front of a jury showing pictures of his re-torn shoulder and the bruises on his wrists, the jury would give him the keys to the city treasury. They settled in mediation, $4.8 million. It was one of the largest settlements in the department's history. But for Elias, it wasn't about the check. Part of the settlement agreement required a public apology and the immediate termination of Officer Kyle Vance. Vance was not just fired. The The department petitioned the state board to decertify him, ensuring he could never wear a badge in that state again. 6 months after the incident, Elias stood before the city council. The room was packed. He wore a suit, his silver star lapel pin catching the light. His left arm was in a sling, recovering from the surgery. He didn't shout. He didn't rage. He spoke into the microphone with the same quiet power he had used in the recycling yard. "You paid me $4.8 million, Elias said. "You think that fixes it. You think money washes away the stain. It doesn't." He looked at the council members. "I served this country for 30 years. I defended the rights of people I've never met. And when I came home, I expected to be treated like a citizen. Instead, I was treated like an enemy combatant in my own hometown." He paused. "Officer Vance is gone. That's good. But the manager who called him, he saw a black man and saw a criminal. The officer saw a black man and saw a threat. Until you change the eyes of the people you hire, you're just going to keep writing checks, and one day the check won't be enough. One day the city will burn." He walked away from the podium. The room was silent. That evening, Elias sat on his front porch. The sun was setting, casting a golden light over the neighborhood. His duplex renovation was finished. He had hired a young kid from the neighborhood to finish the copper work. He held a challenge coin in his good hand. It was heavy brass with the insignia of his old unit. "Send me," the motto read. He rubbed his thumb over the raised letters. He was tired. He was rich technically, but he felt poorer in spirit. He had believed in the system because he had been part of the system. Now he knew that the uniform he had worn was the only thing that had protected him from the reality of his skin color. And without the uniform, he was just another target. He took a sip of iced tea. He watched a police cruiser drive slowly past his house. The officer inside waved. It was a wave of recognition, of respect, maybe even fear. Elias didn't wave back. He just watched until the car turned the corner and disappeared. We have to ask ourselves, why does a black man need a silver star and a military ID to be treated with basic human dignity? Why is the default assumption criminal instead of citizen? If this story made you angry, if it made you think, please hit that like button and share it. We need to keep telling these stories until the reality changes. What do you think? Should officers be personally liable for settlements when they violate civil rights? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.